Despite efforts to brush it under the rug, the IRS targeting scandal is back and back big.
What the White House wanted us to do, if we did what the ranking member suggested we do, this thing would be over. Nothing here. Don't do it. As far as I'm concerned, it's over. When you have the spokesperson for the President of the United States make a definitive statement that it was two rogue agents and start poking at these people who have no power to do anything about it, that is wrong. How dare anybody suggest that we're at the end of this? This is the beginning of this.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Eric Bolling in for Neil Cavuto, and this is Your World. And now we know Washington was involved in the IRS targeting scandal, and it wasn't just some rogue agents in Cincinnati, as the White House claims.
There were line employees at the IRS who improperly targeted conservative groups.
Because today, one of those rogue agents testifying she was told to coordinate with her higher up in Washington on Tea Party cases. This guy, former IRS tax specialist Carter Hull. Hull says he was told to forward his recommendations to the Office of Chief Counsel at the IRS. To Mike Emanuel in Washington on how all these pieces are coming together now. Mike.
Well, good afternoon, Eric. And Carter Hull, a 48-year veteran of the IRS, was a real critical witness. He talked about how there had always been a standard way of handling these types of cases at the IRS until there was that meeting with the IRS General Counsel. Check out this exchange.
I just think it's disgraceful that we're squandering this opportunity to get to the bottom of this because of partisan bickering. One group trying to blame the president, the other one trying to defend themselves that progressives were also being targeted. I think it's very unfortunate because I think the root of this matter is that people who are critical of the way this government is being run were being targeted. Regardless of what the source of their gravamen was, what the source of their complaint was, they were being targeted as U.S. citizens by the IRS.
Pardon, that was a lawmaker talking about kind of the partisan bickering going on at the hearing. He lectured both sides, essentially saying it was important to get to the bottom of this, but this hearing is still ongoing. The Treasury Inspector General who did the investigation into the IRS has been on the stand more recently, but as I mentioned earlier, we also heard some reference to how things were handled at the IRS up until the Tea Party change in procedures. Take a listen to this.
And just for the other side to know, the recommendations were split. You said one group should be approved for tax-exempt status, and one should be disapproved and get further information, further data. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And they gave them to someone who had no experience dealing with this. And they also took them away from you after, according to your testimony, you met with the Chief Counsel's office. Is that correct?
That's correct.
It is unclear where this investigation will go from here, but of course a lot of Republicans are jumping on the idea that the Chief Counsel of the IRS may have delayed some of these Tea Party applications because that is one of the political appointees at the IRS. Eric?
All right, thank you, Mike Emanuel. All right, take a listen to this exchange with former IRS lawyer Carter Hull.
Did either of you think it was strange the type of questions they were being asked? There were some pretty unusual questions asked, like donor information. Do you think that was inappropriate?
Go ahead. I think they were inappropriate, and when I learned of that, I did talk to somebody and say that question should not be asked.
To attorney Jay Sekulow, who is representing 41 of those conservative groups. Jay, sounds like the directive was coming from higher and higher places. The more we hear, the more we learn. It's going up the ladder. Does the testimony help your case?
Well, it does, because we've alleged from the beginning that this was not a couple of rogue agents in Cincinnati. You know, Eric, my first job out of law school a long time ago was the Office of Chief Counsel, Internal Revenue Service. Right. I was in the district office in Atlanta as a trial lawyer. And I knew how this system operates, and it really has not changed much in over 30 years. You've got these levels of review. When it gets to the Chief Counsel's office in Washington, D.C., for them to get involved in a tax-exempt case, you're talking about the rare times they do it, and maybe when there's a case going to the Supreme Court of the United States. But other than that, for them to get involved in individual tax cases and coming up with their own templates and own letters is ridiculous. But it's about as ridiculous, frankly, as the IRS's offer to our clients and others saying, we'll give you expedited review if you agree that you will not basically exercise your full rights under the Internal Revenue Code and under the United States Constitution. We filed yesterday. I'm going to hold it up for you, give you a sense. This is what our response was yesterday to the IRS offer for basically a settlement of the 41 cases. Our clients have been pending for almost 3 years. This is just a sample, Eric, of 7 of the responses that have been given. You're talking about thousands of pages of paper, and the IRS comes back with, well, if you'll just sign these 2 additional requirements, we'll go ahead and give you a review. We're saying, no, do your job and get this resolved. But yes, you've now got a direct link between an IRS senior lawyer, Carter Hull was a senior lawyer with the IRS, to the chief counsel's office. This is just the beginning, as the congressman said. And frankly, you know, the White House could spin this any way they want, but the appointee that the president has in the Internal Revenue Service is the commissioner of the IRS and the chief counsel. So this office is run by a political appointee, right. And now you've got people that were in charge of this for years, decades actually, saying there were never questions like this. These were inappropriate. This is not the way it should be conducted. I objected to the questions that the chief counsel's office were coming up with, which we objected to too, by the way. It strengthens our case significantly.
Jay, we had heard, remember Lois Lerner, one of the chief IRS officials, raising the right hand saying, I'm pleading the fifth here because I don't want to incriminate myself. Since then, we asked Darrell Issa yesterday, Chairman Issa yesterday, whether he was going to get her on the stand, whether or not she was going to testify. We weren't sure. He wasn't sure. What are you hearing? What do you think?
Well, I think what they should do is seriously look at giving her immunity, because if you heard just the testimony from Carter Hull today, and he talked about Lois Lerner a couple of different times, as the other agents did. But I think what you've got is, you give her immunity, you're going to find out a lot. I think she'll sing like a bird. I mean, that's, it's a phrase we use in the law. You know, when someone gets immunity from prosecution, are they going to tell the truth? I think she would tell the truth, and it's going to point to higher up. She didn't make this, and it's clear now, she was not the sole person making these decisions. This was reviewed by people way over her. The chief counsel of the IRS is way over Lois Lerner.
But let's
and the fact of the matter is, she, I think, if she were to tell the truth, would have to cooperate what Carter Hull's already said.
We're trying to follow this trail. Does the trail end at the White House?
Well, look, we know that the White House counsel and the deputy chief of staff of the White House knew about this before the reports came out. We know that for a fact. It's hard to believe, and this is the question I'm going to find out in discovery. Why was it that the Commissioner of Internal Revenue Service made 159 visits to the White House, and why did he meet with the head of the Obama campaign, Stephanie Cutter? I mean, it makes no sense to me.
But Jay,
and why
the difference
was Chief
is
Counsel's office grabbing Tea Party and conservative cases?
The difference here being whether they knew about it, that's one thing. Whether it was a directive from the White House, that's a completely different can of worms, is it not?
Oh, sure it would be. And, you know, you don't have that evidence yet, but you're on a path. And I think it's fair to say that we've taken another step up the ladder here of culpability at higher levels. Does it reach inside the White House? We're going to find out, I think, over time. How far it would go in the White House, that's going to be determined by the facts. You know, we talk about facts and circumstances, Eric, and the fact is that the IRS was supposed to be reviewing these applications under a facts and circumstance test. They violated their own rules and regulations. They violated the civil rights and the constitutional rights of the individual groups here. And remember this, and I'm not a fan of Eric Holder's, you know that. Eric Holder was the one who said there may have been criminal conduct here in the targeting of these individual groups. He's the one who said the FBI needs to be investigating the IRS. When you look at all of this and you ask yourself, and the White House counsel was at least aware of what was going on towards the end of this, and now we know that the White House appointed chief counsel of the IRS, his office, took these cases over. I mean, their narrative that the White House has put out just does not work, and it's being proved inconsistent, illogical, and frankly not truthful every single day this continues.
All right, Jay, we're going to have to leave it there. We wanted to talk a little bit about the Inspector General getting grilled by the Democrats, maybe making it a little bit more political than a search for answers. We don't have time. We ran out of time. I want to say thank you very much. Jay Sekulow, good luck with the lawsuit.
Thanks, Eric.
You know very well, because you've heard from people, that when others talk about applications and groups, these folks have names and faces. Some of them live in my district as some of the individuals that waited a very, very long time to get a response to that.
Well, one of those names and one of those faces, George Bruneman, is with the Southwest Cincinnati Tea Party and knows what it's like to be targeted by the IRS. Mr. Bruneman, tell us exactly what that means. What was the targeting like? What did you go through?
Personally, we went through an actual personal audit of our business and our personal taxes. And when the lady called, she said it was in response to our involvement with the Cincinnati Tea Party. So it was never really a question of whether or not, you know, we were being targeted. The lady said it in the first statement. But I think what you're seeing today is in the testimony from the lady from Cincinnati and from Mr. Hall, was that this thing was systemic. It was baffling to the people who had been doing the job forever, and it was obvious that this was a new class of treatment for people, the Tea Parties and the Patriots.
Okay. So you say you're targeted. What does that mean? You applied for tax-exempt status, 501c4, I believe. And what was the pushback? Tell us about it.
Our group specifically was told by our lawyers, don't even bother filing right now because the IRS isn't granting any. But in my talking with like Tom Zawistowski of the Ohio Liberty Coalition and some of the people that testified in the previous hearing, you know, I've seen their applications, I've seen their line of questions, and clearly it's kind of obvious. If you look at the first round of questions that came into the groups, they look logical. They were questions about your political involvement, whether or not you participated in campaigns. It's not until they submitted the answers to those questions and then a second round of questions came out, which today we found out came from DC, that you were getting into things like, you know, tell us all of your donors, all of your vendors, anyone who attends your meetings or speaks at your meetings, and give us the content of your prayers and why are you associating with people like Justin Binnick Thomas. It wasn't until that second round of questions that things really got out of hand. And I think you're seeing from today's testimony that that's when DC got directly involved and started taking control away from the Cincinnati office.
Mr. Bruneman, the FBI says they're on the case. They're investigating. Have you heard from them?
No, I have not. And I'm not aware of any group that has yet from the Tea Party side.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. George Bruneman, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.